Today I want to take a look at Luminar 2018. Hey, thanks for dropping in and welcome back. It's so good to see you again. Now, when you're looking for your own style as a photographer, it doesn't really help if you just take a bunch of plugins and apply them to all your photos. That's somebody else's style. But plugins can be a pretty decent starting point when you start editing your photos. You find the plugin you like, apply it, and then make your own changes so that it does match your style. One of the programs that recently got updated was Luminar. And Luminar is a program from MacFun, who is now Skylum, that at first glance I looked at it and I thought, I don't want a program that's going to make all the changes for me, that's going to edit all of my photos. I don't want to do it automatically because, for one thing, I want to build the skill set myself, and I also want to have my own style. So I resisted it for a while. I used to use Aperture on the Mac to edit my photos, and I've since moved to Lightroom. I really like Lightroom. I don't like the subscription model, but I really like it. And Photoshop gives me amazingly powerful tools over that. But most of my editing, I do in Lightroom, and I do decent post-production on my photos compared to what I was doing in Aperture. I like Lightroom. But one of the things that Lightroom and Photoshop allow you to do is to use these plugins. And for the longest time, I was using the Nik collection. It was Nik software, got sold to Google, and now it was just sold to DxO Labs. Now that's good news because I really like the Nik collection. Silver Effects is a great program for doing black and white. You can pick the kind of film that you want to emulate and the whole thing. It's super powerful. Color Effects Pro is a great program. Define 2 for noise reduction, super great. I have all these presets that I really don't use very often. I have the Nik collection, which I use a reasonable amount. And then there's my own editing. I really didn't see a need for Luminar, but I started playing around with a demo. And I want to show you one of the things that I found that might make it worth looking into if you're doing post-production on your photos. I found that Luminar can take a good edit and turn it into a really good edit. And I found that with little tweaks here and there, I can take my own edit and just add that little bit of punch that gives me a photo that I absolutely love. And that's the end goal, right? So let's take a look at an example of this. So this is a photo that I took at Folly Beach, South Carolina, right about the time Hurricane Irma was threatening to come up the coast. It was windy and the waves were pounding pretty good. It was windy enough that it was hard to keep the camera still even on a tripod, but I really liked the long exposure and the soft waves on the rocks. Now most of these edits I could probably do in Luminar or Photoshop, but because I'm familiar with Lightroom, I do the basic editing first there. That's where I'd prefer to do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is go set my lens to match the lens that I took the photo with. Normally, if it was a building or I had to deal with wide-angle lenses or something, I might check the transform setting, but that's not the case here, so I'm not going to worry about it. Another thing I do is check to make sure that the horizon is level and that I like the crop, and that's all the case here. Looks fairly level, the crop is good, so I'm not going to change anything there either. And because this is so washed out, the first thing I'm going to do is hit it with some contrast. And I'm thinking around 64, 65. Yeah, that should do it. Next, I'm going to drop these highlights down a little bit. I don't want to bring them all the way down, so maybe 64 should do it. And I'm going to bring the whites up. As you can see, they're not clipping in the histogram, so I'm going to bring them up probably to about 25 or so. Yeah, that's fine. We'll try that. As you can see, they're still not clipping. Next, I'm going to bring down the blacks. Now, if I bring them all the way down to where, a little too far, to where they're not clipping, the photo is still a little bit dark for me, and I want to make sure I retain some of the details and the shadows. So I'm only going to bring them down to about 47 or so. And that way I retain some of that light on the rocks. And to get some of that light on the rocks back, I'm actually going to bring the shadow up a little bit. I don't want to bring it too far because then it washes out the contrast in the rest of the picture. So maybe 20 or so. That way I lighten them up a little bit, and that's pretty good. Now the presence, when it comes to clarity and vibrancy and saturation, when I was playing and producing music, there was an adage that said if you can hear an effect, it's too much. You almost want to mix down music so that the effects are more of a feel than an actual something you can pick out. And I found for my taste, the same is true of photography. I don't want to blow this stuff out and make it look cartoonish. And we see plenty of that out on the internet. So with all of these effects, really, I go very gentle, very subtle changes. And of course, you can break out of that for artistic reasons, but my personal preference is just to be subtle. I want to enhance the photo, not make it look like an acid trip. So I'm going to add a little bit of clarity, maybe up to 12 or so. See, if I go too far, it gets too much. So yeah, maybe, oh, that's not bad. That's not bad. I'm going to pump up the vibrance just a little bit, maybe +8. Then I'm going to come down to detail. And I'm going to set my edge masking. If you hold the Option key and then move the masking slider, you can see where your edge effect is actually going to be applied. Now, I don't want it on all the water and the sky. I just want it on the edge of the rocks and maybe a little bit in the ocean. Now I'm going to hold down my Option key and set my sharpening amount. Now this is one you don't want to overdo as well, because if you do, you'll create all kinds of artifacts in the photo. Not sure if you can see in this little detail, but there's all kinds of garbage in there. So we want to back this down and just kind of set the sharpening to where, again, it's almost a feel. Another way to combat that noise in the photo is to drop the detail a little bit. You still get your edges, but you don't get all that noise. Now normally you can add noise reduction here. I don't mess with the luminance setting because it takes out the detail. And I'm sure there are people who can do this really well, but I'm not one of them. So I generally leave that alone. And I could add some noise reduction in color, but I'm going to add some noise reduction to this photo at the end anyway, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. The next thing I could do is add some vignette to this photo. I'll add a little bit. And I'm going to crank up my exposure just a little bit to bring that center out, just a touch. Just to draw your attention to the center. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a radial filter. Now by default, a radial filter impacts the areas outside the circle, and we don't want that. So if you want to impact the areas within the circle, you need to make sure that you click on Invert Mask. And I'll show you here, now that that's checked, now see my exposure impacts inside the circle. So I'm going to set the exposure back, and I want to turn up the sharpness on those rocks. I want them to be a little bit sharper. And I'm also going to boost the whites in that area just a little bit, just to bring out some of the whites in the water and the foam. Just as a little bit of detail. And turn it off and see the difference. Turn it back on. Yeah, that's good. All right, now we're going to open it up in Luminar. And I'm going to edit a copy that has the current Lightroom adjustments. So it'll create another copy with these adjustments. Fast forward, and now we're in Luminar. Now, if you go into categories, there's a whole lot of presets that you can grab from their website. Some of them are paid. A lot of them are free. And a lot of them are pretty useful. I've got a couple of my favorites that I've set aside. Do things like Clarity Booster. And as you can see, that does just that. Crush Shadows. Gotham is a fun one. That's kind of a cool effect. Center of Attention will give it this soft radiance and also put a vignette on it. That's kind of cool. Dramatic Look. I like this one. This one will suck out a lot of the color and just make it a little harsh. But it's a neat look. There's a bunch of these different presets that you can use. You can also go into a custom workspace. We're going to go into Quick and Awesome. And it gives me this one, the Accent AI filter, which is pretty cool because it looks at your photo and tries to intelligently guess what it needs. And as you see, as you crank that up, it can have quite the dramatic effect. processing. But that's more than I want. So I'm going to actually just leave that about 23% for now. And I'm going to come down here to clarity, and I'm going to add a little bit of that and let Luminar do its thing there. I'm going to add a little bit of saturation. Again, I don't want to make it look cartoonish, so I'm going to stick to 18 there. And we can look at the original picture and this one. I'm going to add a filter. One of the ones I really like using is the remove color cast. Now there's two auto settings, and I really don't know what the difference is, but generally I find that if I play with one, I'm not happy with it. And if I play with the other, I am. Now in this case, see, this adds a little bit of that red, and I really like it. I'm guessing that one probably takes out the orangish colors, and the other one might take out the bluish colors. But I really like a little bit of that warmth in the picture. Yeah, see, that's nice. It's just got a little bit of warmth to it, and a little bit of pop. You can go over here and toggle a filter. I'm going to shut off clarity for a moment. Yeah, I'll leave clarity off, I think. Actually, let me turn it on, and then I'll just delete it from the list. And finally, we can add some vignette. Now, the nice thing about this vignette is you can move the center all around, and it has this inner light setting, which will bring up the light on the inside of the vignette, which I really, really like. So with, I'm going to back down the outside vignette a little bit just so it's not so glaring. Yeah, I like that. Bring up the vibrance just a little bit, just to show off that orange tint. And let's try the polarizing filter and see what it does for us. All right, I'm going to add a little polarizing filter. You can see the difference. Brings a little bit of blue into the water and adds to the blue in the sky. That is nice. And we'll apply it, and it'll save out. Okay, so that's the progression of our photo. We go from the original to the Lightroom edit, which is nice. I do like the really soft character to that one. To the Luminar, which is a little punchier, but definitely more colorful. Now, the last thing I want to do to this, before we call this a wrap, is I want to do some noise reduction. Now, there's a number of ways you can do noise reduction. You can do noise reduction within Lightroom, obviously within Photoshop. You can do it within Luminar. I really like the Define product from the Nick collection. Although the same company that makes Luminar also makes Noiseless, which I started looking at today, and I really like it. And it could end up replacing Define as my go-to noise reduction program. So as you can see, down in the left-hand corner, there's a lot of noise on the left side. On the right, it's done its best to clean it up. Now, the problem with noise reduction is a lot of times it'll take out detail in your photo too. So I'm going to go back. So I'm going to go into the manual reduce controls, and I'm going to reduce the noise reduction just a little bit. I'm going to back it down to 87-ish%. And while that should still give me a decent noise reduction, it should also help retain some of my detail. That might still be a little bit hot, so back it down to 83. Now this depends on your ISO setting, it depends on your photo, your lighting, the amount of detail you have. It depends on a lot, so this is kind of an art form. Now since this is a soft photo anyways, it's not going to hurt me a lot if I overdo the noise reduction. So I'm not too terribly worried about it in this case. So I'm going to save that out. And there it is. So that's the original. That's with the Lightroom edits. That's with the Luminar edits. And that's with just some final noise reduction. But as you can see between the Lightroom edit and the Luminar edit, it's a pretty dramatic difference. It really brings some color into it, and it really changed up that photo. Now, could I have done that all in Lightroom? Yes, but it would have taken a great deal of tweaking. And I might have changed it up, decided that I liked what I saw, and not taken it that step further, and really found the photo that makes me happy, which is what I got out of Luminar. I know it's been a long video. Hopefully you got something out of it, and it was worth your time. Now, I'm not being paid by Skylum or MacFun or anybody. It's just something that I've found that I really like, and I would say it's worth the time for you to look into. So that's just a super quick look at Luminar 2018. It's available for the Mac and the PC, which is another reason I really like it. I can use it on either platform. I'll put the link below. If you found this video useful or entertaining or anything like that, give it a like and click the thumbs up icon. You know I'm going to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Check out some of the other videos. And honestly, if you've got feedback or comments, definitely leave a comment in the space. I answer all of my comments, even the ones that look like spam. But I'm definitely interested in your feedback because I want to add value to this channel. I want to make it worth watching. So once again, thank you for dropping in. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you next time.